Welcome back to Hanging Out Podcast. This is a traditional, semi-traditional. We've only done this once before.
Just to hang out.
We're
Just a
doing
straight up hangout.
Bruce and Alan. I do actually have 50 hardcore interview questions for you.
Uh-oh.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
That you haven't asked in all this time that we've known each other?
They're very personal, highly personal. Things like, why aren't you more successful? How much does your house cost? Things like that. I actually saw that happen I listened to that happen on a radio show. It was very awkward.
Oh, that is awkward, yeah.
So, I just got back. I'm scruffy, overshaved. I
don't have any excuse, but I'm scruffy too.
You've been busy.
I've been busy, but I've been sitting at home for the past couple of weeks since I got back from Emerald City. So that was the weekend of the 8th. So it's a few weeks ago.
This is your low season, isn't it? As far as traveling.
I mean, March is usually like the first blip that goes up, and then I'll have kind of like, depending on the year, I'll sometimes have like an April show, a May show, and then summer's really busy. And then, yeah, it's just go time until like beginning of October or something like that.
Yeah, all flying too. That
mostly flying. Yeah, mostly flying. I've got like 2 driving shows, 3 driving shows, something like that in the mix.
Yeah, Rose City, and you don't drive Salt Lake.
Rose City, Emerald City, and Lilac City. For Lilac City, I carpool with a friend, Kayla Classy. We both do booths at that one, so I drive my stuff up to her place. We pilot into her van that she's got. She's got quite a nice van that has enough room for both people's stuff, and then we drive over to Spokane, and it's a fun hangout weekend. So
Spokane, I like Spokane.
I like Spokane too. And we've got some good friends that live out there that we get to hang out with. Some author folks that I know, or an author, and his wife is also more of an artist, more of a visual artist. So it's a nice weekend. You would approve. It's one of the maybe the 2 times each year that I'll enjoy a nice bourbon. Because we've got like a list of a couple speakeasies or things that they've got in Spokane, and so that's what we do when we hang out.
Recently stopped enjoying as much bourbon, but because I got really into bourbon collecting. Have you heard about this?
No.
So I don't know.
So you're collecting it instead of drinking it?
Yeah, but the bottles are ridiculously expensive. So
yeah,
I went up to Louisville, Kentucky, and spent a couple grand on bourbon. And then when I was in Illinois bottles don't go through the state, so they're basically all MSRP. I mean, they can, which is market price, so they can raise them if they want to, but they normally don't. And anyway,
so they're cheaper in Illinois.
Yeah, compared to down here, but down here it's mostly skeevy liquor stores that know they can raise all the prices. Because I live in the Delta.
Yeah,
not known for its low prices for some reason.
Well, it's just not known for
honest and good business.
Not known for being in a very competitive market, right?
Yeah.
Like in a big urban area, you're likely to have a lot of competitors, and the back and beyond, not so much.
Yeah. Speaking of which, since we're chilling out today, I got a
nice you've got some. So it's not all just sitting on your shelf.
Yeah. I anytime I have a successful show, I take a break and have a little drink, a nice pour, as it were. So
I can respect that. even though I barely ever partake myself.
Hmm. So, and I do the same thing. Became a ritual when I would finish a painting. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, I can't really tie one on every time I finish a painting now, because I
Because you're finishing a lot of paintings.
still have paintings. But when I finish, a big project or something, I'll
Sure.
take a moment, maybe have a fire.
You finish, let's say, all the interior illustrations for a Grimoire Press book.
Yeah, or oh yeah, I'm working for Broken Binding now, too.
Okay,
So
nice.
much less interior work though. There's like 3 per book. Um,
Okay, so it's
but
mostly about the cover.
I will shout out. Well, they do cover. They do a front cover. Ooh, do they do a back cover? I think it's a wraparound. But then
Okay,
they do 2 uh,
sure.
board paintings in full color, like
Board?
inside board, like inside the cover. And then
Oh,
they do
I did one of those last year. I forget what they're called. End papers.
no. These are different. So end papers are like the actual in here. So like this is a soft back, but like inside board would be like the inside of the actual cover, and then like the first page is the end paper. I'm pretty sure. I think I've got that. Might be
Maybe.
wrong. You're pushing me.
Sounds like it's fulfilling a similar purpose.
So each book has something like 6 or 7 original paintings
Hmm.
done for it, which
Gotcha.
would include the interiors there. So, and I gotta give a shout out. Petrick Leo, who does these, is a ridiculously nice
He
guy.
is very cool. Yes, I haven't. I've only interacted with him back on Twitter when we were all more active over there.
Yeah.
But he was very excited about the work that I did for Orbit's Witcher special editions.
Oh yeah.
And was very nice. Gave some nice shout outs to my work and the work that the other artists did on those books.
Yeah.
But
He is as an art director, it's really good too. Like I
he seems like someone who's really into the art of it all.
well, he's
So
hands
that
on.
makes sense. Yeah.
Like a good hands on. Like they
Hmm.
know the direction they want to go in. You know.
Hmm.
Um, I don't want to speak ill of art directors, but sometimes you get one and they don't want to give you a direction, and then you'll throw out 4 or 5 whatever thumbnails. They're like, not really any of them, or.
That's frustrating. Yeah, if they're not if they're not any of them, just keep on doing thumbnails until the end of the world.
Yeah, which is then there's Sean. You could give him one drawing on a napkin, and he'd be like, "Sounds good, let's do it."
I like that okay. I mean, obviously there's downsides to art directors who are just like, "Okay, I trust you, do your own thing," because then it really is on your shoulders fully. Um, but that's a good challenge to have for the most part.
Well, there's a lot of the only reason I've Sean's busy and doesn't tend to do the master read until because the art takes longer, right? And then he'll do
Hmm.
the master read, and so he does put up front that it's sort of on my shoulders to get things right.
Hmm.
Uh, but then when he does the master read, if there's corrections that need to be made that he's caught then because he'll look at the art while he's
Yeah.
reading, then he'll do a lot of there. That's the work I do the most corrections on.
Hmm.
Um, because the fans want it that way.
Yeah,
And
when
I
they
want it. I
tell
mean,
you the ring needs to be on the other finger.
it's so funny. Fine with the ring being on. He actually does switch it on different fingers on different books.
Hmm.
If you make it to that book, but
I will never
uh,
read those books.
I'm saving them. I have a lot of people. You'd be surprised at the. Usually with the Bulgarian, it's like, oh, I read those as a kid, really liked them. But
Oh, Belgariad? Yeah,
yeah,
loved those. They were foundational fantasy for me growing up.
very differing conversations I have around Thomas Covenant. Either you love it or you hate it.
Yeah, I tried to read the first book and bounced very hard off of that.
I think a lot of people. Um, I t- I sometimes wonder if I should bring them to shows because of all the different conversations that don't end up as sales, right? But
Mm-hmm.
then every once in a while, you get one. If one guy comes up and buys, I don't know, one of each print that I have there, it sort of makes it worth it, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Of all the Covenant stuff. But the conversations around it get a little grueling. So
I would imagine. Yeah, that's a little bit of controversy with that particular one. So you were just at a show. Did you have any
two
grueling
shows.
conversation? Did you
Two
did
shows.
you have a? Oh, okay. There was like C2E2
No,
and
I didn't end up. You had told me you had heard some things about C2E2, not bad things, but just like I remember you said like Alan Panical's local and he doesn't go, or and then some other things, and then
yeah, my impression is it's kind of like a middling show. It's possibly a show that they have overexpanded based on what the demand actually is. That's my best guess because they're in Chicago. They're in the largest convention center in the country, as far as I know. And so it's very easy for them to overexpand that one. And I don't think it's a destination show to the degree that like Emerald City or New York Comic Con or some of their other shows are. So it's like that meme of the mother trying to deal with one child in the pool while another one's struggling and about to drown, and then there's like another kid who's just like a skeleton on the bottom of the ocean.
yeah,
Um, like it does kind of feel like I would say that C2E2 is the one that's struggling but not fully drowned yet.
I
Um,
so I heard that, and then I heard once I got the prices for the booths, which I don't want to
mhm.
misquote, I have to look them up. I think it was something like I would do a corner there, right? So
Yeah,
it'd
and
be
it's an expensive booth, right?
yeah, very expensive. And I had somebody else tell me that the the price, it's cutting so much into what you're going to make
Yeah.
at that point. Uh, that said, I talked to a lot of artists at this show and at Indiana and Kansas City, and
Hmm.
I felt bad because every artist I talked to, either they said it was their best show that they would do, or there had been people who have been trying to get in for the last like 5 years
To C2E2?
to C2E2. Apparently, apparently me getting a vendor spot was a big deal.
Oh, okay.
And
Well,
then
maybe they're not doing very well, or maybe they don't have a very good selection of shows that they're doing.
I don't know. Not sure what I would have said because I've gotten in 2 years in a row now. And one of the people I talked to that has been wanting to go is a much better artist than me, especially for conventions. So
Sure, but you can be a good artist and not necessarily have a great slate of conventions that you necessarily do. Um, there's certainly lots of great artists who don't do conventions at all, really. So, really it's up to you to find which ones are good, which ones really do well for you
it's
personally, and
true.
so on.
It might have been the language I used when I responded because I
Mileage may
jokingly,
vary. Yeah.
they sent questions like, "What's your ROI? How do you gauge success?" And I was like, they're asking very corporate questions, and I'm going to
Hmm.
jokingly give them very corporate response. So
Yeah.
I wish I could
Give
find my answers.
some very smarmy answers back.
Yeah,
Okay, you bean counters. Here's the
they,
language that you understand.
for all I know, they were like, "Oh, this guy really gets it." So,
He's on our wavelength.
but
Unlike
no,
all the other artists who just care about art and stuff.
they care about vision. Damn.
Yeah.
No, I went to Indiana Comic Con.
Mm-hmm.
So since I didn't get to Gen Con, I was trying smaller shows that were sort of
Sure.
just drivable. Um, and I didn't know this before I went, but Indiana Comic Con was bought by. It's a Fan X show. They just don't say it.
Okay. Fan
It's what.
X or Fan Expo?
Uh,
Because those are
ooh,
two different things. Fan X is Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City. So yeah, it was Fan Expo. It's a Fan Expo show,
Okay. So
and
like
so
Denver Fan Expo and all the rest of that.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Load in. Do you know how the load in? I mean, well, you take suitcases, but load in for Gen Con is extremely. It's grueling, but it's tight. You know, they send you to a
Hmm.
marshaling yard. They make sure you're parking.
Yeah.
Load in for this, and I've never seen a convention like this before.
Chaos.
It's no, there's no one directing it, and they just let everybody line up where they will around the block.
Hmm.
And it was a 2 hour wait in a line just to get to the dock. Uh, yeah, that was terrible, and I didn't see anybody, any administrator, anybody working for Fan Expo or well, we'll call it Indiana Comic Con, working there at all. It's almost
Doesn't
like, hey,
surprise me.
we got your money, and
Yeah, they have that kind of reputation.
and there was, you know, as with many of these shows, there was no discrimination on who got in, and half of the people I saw selling art were those larger booths that are I call them work for hire, like gallery booths. Like they didn't make the art; they're just selling it.
Right, like VTech or Panda Power, whatever it's called, Panda
Yeah,
Gallery,
yeah.
those sorts of things. Yeah.
I actually walked up to a guy because I liked how they were supporting their pro panels, and I was
Hmm.
asking him questions about those. And I got two questions in, and you could tell he was like somebody actually in charge. And he stopped me and he goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! If you want to interview me about this, you can hire me as
As a consultant.
as a consultant, but otherwise I'm done." And I was like, "What the hell, man?"
Because they are soulless leeches rather than actual artists running those things. Yeah.
Yeah, he definitely was a leech.
Yeah. No, that they're absolutely leeching off of the convention thing and sort of
Well,
middlemen who are taking advantage of the fact that a lot of artists are kind of scared to jump in and really create a brand and their own booth presence and all the rest of that. So they take advantage for sure.
Well, you and I have talked a lot about this. Like, if cons keep getting, and of course you go to more than me, but if cons keep getting more sort of corporatized, it's all going to be gallery boxes, gallery shows, mystery boxes, and
And
dice.
well, no, let's not forget the most important ingredient, which is those little bobblehead things.
Oh, Funko. Yeah,
Funkos. Funkos are the cancer that is spread across conventions everywhere and game stores and all the rest of it. The beanie
mystery
babies of our
boxes.
time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that is probably the long-term prognosis if more mergers and acquisitions are allowed to happen in this space to the point where it's going to come down to like a duopoly
Between
um,
Reed and Fan Expo.
between Reed and Fan Expo. That's already what's happening to a
I
large
didn't know
degree.
Fan Expo was aggressively buying things either. Uh,
Well, Fan
he bought
Expo bought the remnants of Wizard World,
Wizard
so they
World.
have all of those shows. They have all of their original shows. I think they also bought, I think Boston Comic Con, and they bought Denver, which used to be an independent. They bought Indiana, which used to be independent. So like, yeah, they're very aggressively buying shows. ReedPop is very aggressively buying shows and expanding. They're also hiring themselves out as managers of shows too, because they
Yeah,
run PAX for Penny Arcade and they run the Magic Cons for Wizards of the Coast.
yeah. I lied. This whole thing's been a lie and
What?
deceit. I was looking at the other shows they do, and it is in fact Fan X, not Fan Expo.
Oh, okay.
So this whole
So
thing
so
for the podcast
so
is a
they're a rare third party
mm.
expansion where it's not one of the two big fish, but it's like another one that's like starting to branch out.
Well,
That's actually interesting.
a
Yeah.
lot of people were upset that about that change. Actually, a lot of the
Hmm.
vendors. It looks like here they also own Tampa Bay Comic Con and Atlanta Comic Con, which is interesting.
Okay.
So that, I guess they are sort of trying to get in the game there.
So they're the Dr. Pepper of this convention world.
Um, you never know; that might become the Mountain Dew.
Well, Mountain Dew's
Uh,
a Pepsi product, but yeah.
that's true. Yeah, that's true. I forgot Dr. Pepper. So I wouldn't return to this show. It was my complaints still stand. It was a glorified. I told people it was a glorified farmers market, not farmers market, but what do you call those things?
Oh, like an art fair kind of thing, like a
Yeah,
street
like a
show.
street fair. Yeah,
Yeah, street fair.
it was it was nothing but comic book reseller. A lot of resellers, a lot of third party.
Didn't have much of an identity and didn't have a lot of independent voices,
Well,
personal work, that kind of thing.
apparently they had like 150 artist booths there. But
so they've overexpanded possibly too.
Way overexpanded, and what their artist booths looked terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it probably wasn't the artist's fault. It was just the bare minimum.
Sure, it's just the way the way that they're organizing it.
And so anyway, I was not happy. I made $3K.
Okay.
Which we talked about. My floor at this point is sort of $2K. So
sure.
I made $1,000, but by the time you eat, and I had to spend a week in Illinois in between the shows,
mm-hmm.
it doesn't come out that much. And
right.
Tim Von Ruden was there, surprisingly, and he.
Well, he's Midwest based, right?
Yeah.
So not a super long way to go for him, I guess. But go on.
We gotta have him on the show later on this year, because he diversified his tabletop to sort of an extreme. Now his prints are maybe only 25% of his tabletop now.
Mm-hmm.
The others are taken up with like postcard packs and pins and coins, and his books, which now he's doing an omnibus book.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me that he goes to these smaller shows because they'll make him. So at that one, for instance, he said he was expecting to make $5K, which makes it, which would have been great for me. And he said at those smaller shows, it's just worth it to diversify because people aren't looking for the quality sales, what he calls quality sales versus quantity sales. He wants, $20 purchases, $5 purchases.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So he's got all the what's the term for it? Like he's got all the the basic goods. Rather than it's not a show for collectors per se.
No.
Yeah.
Well, at first, I kept wondering, like, okay, yeah, but I've never gone to a show and it done this poorly, and which that's not to say $3K is not bad. My first Comic-Con, I made $600, right? But,
sure.
But
you've come a long way, but you have higher expectations now. You've got higher costs now as well,
right?
And everything costs more now.
I was getting a little worried. I was like, oh, maybe I didn't have a lot of new work because I'm still in NDA prison. I was like, well, maybe it really, the year's really bad, like people have said.
But you've never done that show before, so it shouldn't technically matter that much whether you have new work or not, because it's a new crowd technically.
Well, my worry was more for the next show, Kansas City.
Okay, sure.
But then I went to Kansas City and made $10K, and so it was really just that show.
So it washes out, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I have nothing but complaints about my time at Indiana Comic-Con. Nothing but complaints.
Well, that's the goal of going out and trying these shows, right? Now you know.
Yeah. Do your research first.
Well, I don't know. I'm a big fan of just going out and trying it, giving it a shot. And in some cases, in a lot of cases, I think it's often advisable to go to a show 2 times before you pull the plug or decide it's a mainstay, because in many cases people will kind of like scout you out the first time, and if you keep coming back, they'll actually get more spendy with you.
So that's why I walk around and talk to people, right? Talking to Tim, who traditionally makes $5K there. That sort of tells me what the top might be, because I would say Tim's one of the best doing this.
Yeah, he's someone who at a good show is making a lot more than 5K.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I would return, like I said, if I maybe I need to make a setup that's not quality sales and more quantity sales.
Well, it's less about
Without,
maybe quality versus quantity sales is part of it, but it's also a setup that is more about like these kind of like commodities rather than about artist identity per se. You know,
yeah.
if you have some merchandise that's really just like, oh, it's a cool thing that you can use for your gaming or whatever, then that's going to reach some additional markets
Exactly. Yeah.
that are not necessarily people looking to decide, oh, you're our new favorite artist that we're going to hang up on our wall. Different
Well, there is
mentality.
something to, yeah, so it totally, I think, does depend on the audience. I was thinking about this today. I think if I were to do that at a show like Kansas City, where I've already got a large collector base, I have people come back over and over.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to suddenly fill half my table, I think with playmats and pins, one thing I get over and over is how different my setup looks because it's very
Mm-hmm.
gallery esque.
Yeah.
And then people see it, I think, almost as an oasis for their eyes, where
Sure.
it's more simplistic than like, let me cram everything in this 6 foot table.
Yeah.
I got that over and over again. And I think if I were to diversify at something like that show or maybe a Dragon Con, I might actually end up not making more money.
There are, as long as you've got space to expand, there are ways that you can incorporate that kind of product without giving up the classy feel of your booth.
Mm.
But that is a problem that you would have to specifically solve for.
Right.
Because you're right, if you don't solve for the problem, if you don't think it through and plan it out, and you just cram everything in there, then yeah, you might lose some sales from people who were previously enjoying the way that you were presenting the work.
Well, I've seen artists go and have, books, pens, playmats, whatever the metal prints, little postcard, like everything, buttons that you can throw at it. And it was done well. I've seen it done in a classy way. And then at the end of the show, they make, as much as I do. And I'm thinking, man, if I set all that up, I would hope to make more than I'm making. So.
Yeah, that is an aspect that I've thought about. I know people who have all the things and like consistently make, like 5 to 10K more than I do. So it's like, okay, that I could see an argument
Right.
via how they're doing, an argument for putting in the extra work and doing it. I also know people who make less than I do and cram all the things in. So
the cram is what I think it's it's a balancing act, right?
I
But
think
one thing you don't want to do is blend in with the utter chaos that a show is.
Sure. There is that, and there are multiple ways that you can stand out from the crowd.
Mm.
There's classier and less classy ways to do that. Some of them are very in your face, and they still work to steadily draw in customers if that's something that works with your brand and the type of thing that you're doing. So there are multiple strategies to that are viable.
Well, he did it Tim did it in a classy way,
Of
and that's
course.
why I wanted.
Yeah.
He told me, let's talk about it at the end of the year because this is the first time he had like two
Testing
or three
it out.
testing it out, and he'll let us know then if it was profitable, and which I'm sure for Tim, he's a thoughtful guy. I'm sure it'll end up be profitable, but
yeah. He'll work it out. I think, in my case, I'm always thinking about that return on effort thing because I'm getting too old for this shit, man.
Yeah. When you're doing, how many shows do you do? Like 18, something like that?
No. I do like 14 max. and a good share of those are like magic events, like smaller
Mm.
um, magic competitions, essentially, where there's like maybe a line of 5 to 10 magic artists on the sidelines, and it's pretty quiet and restful as convention experiences go because your target audience is just right there. They know who you are. They can connect it directly to the product that they are using all weekend. You do not have to hunt down customers. They come straight to you. They get their card signed. They know what they want, more or less. Like it's just a conveyor belt of customers, more or less. Versus a Comic Con where you basically have to be a carnival barker, drawing people in because they don't know who's there, and it could be anything related to any of their interests or none, and they are completely bedazzled and overwhelmed and ready to go seek solace. So you have to cut through. You have to work real hard to cut through all that. So not every show out of the many that I do is high effort.
But on the effort side, let's say that you had, I don't know, let's say you did one of those gallery booths where it's pro panels all around or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, and you had to break down and set that up 10 times by yourself. You'd stop doing shows, maybe.
That's the reason why. So I've actually had a set of pro panels that a fellow artist gifted me
Hmm.
around 2020, and they have sat in my garage since that time, and I have not used them in a single show because the thought of having to load those things in, and they take up a bunch of space. I've basically got my pantry items sitting on top of them currently because they take up so much space.
They'll leave
Um,
indents, man,
hmm?
and you won't be able to get them out. If it's heavy enough, it leaves an indent. You won't get it out. It happened to me with a box.
I haven't. I honestly haven't looked. They're in boxes. They're in cardboard
Oh, okay.
boxes and everything.
What color
Uh,
are they? I'll buy them.
they're like black, I think.
Damn.
So not your gray. That
Yeah.
I think that if I remember right, that's what you went with. But yeah, no,
Correct.
they're like a charcoal kind of a look. But I've never actually pulled them out, even though it would probably benefit me. I would probably make at least marginally more at some conventions that I do that are in driving range. I guess the 2 or 3 of them that I do are the only ones that I could even use them at.
Right.
But when it rolls around to Emerald City again each year, I think about it, I sigh, and then I go back to my my normal flourish and so
You
on.
could do it one year. There's so much. I mean, flourish panels are easy to set up, but pro panels are even easier. And I
Yeah, Emerald City would probably be the one to go for as
I'd
far
go
as
with.
that. Um, one of these years, I guess maybe I should just say, okay, next year we're doing it.
Also depends because like we were doing it in Sarah's HRV Honda HRV, which is a very small sort of hatchback, and cramming things in there. Like I was lucky to get 10K worth of merchandise in there,
Hmm.
and switching to a truck with the like 7 foot bed, I can get 20K plus worth of merchandise in there.
Hmm.
So I'll never have to upgrade again. But those pro panels took up so much space in the HRV, it became just not worth it almost.
Yeah, I could definitely make it work. I think basically, if I think about it, I mean we've got like a Chrysler, what's it like a Townsville or Townsend or something like that. It's just a van, like a mom van kind of a
Mhm.
deal, but it's got plenty of space. And adding the pro panels to my pack in pack out would basically take up like half the cubic space maybe of the back end of that thing. But
You don't do typical load in. You just kind of walk your stuff in.
yeah, yeah, I like to roll in. Um, I do have uh, a,
Mm.
a wagon or whatever, but I think for those I'd have to get like a flatbed thing to carry to pull them in via the
Which,
loading dock.
to be fair, you could U-Haul truck for $20, you know, um, a day. I think it's $20 a day plus gas and mileage. So,
Yeah, but like I'm not even sure if a U-Haul truck would fit into the.
oh no, like a normal pickup truck. They
Oh,
sell
okay.
those too.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I don't know.
basically, what it boils down to is I have the physical space. I could do it. Like I'm not filling the cubic space as it is, right? So I could fit everything that I currently bring on top of those things. Now that probably would fill it close to the ceiling of the thing between what I already bring and those things. Um,
The load-in, I don't know how the new one is. When they were in the other convention center,
yeah,
uh,
they're in a new one, and it's
it was
a you load in via the parking garage that's under the building, and it does have a height restriction.
okay. The It might be the same parking garage they used before. I really don't know. How far are the buildings away? Are they?
The Summit building is where I don't know if you remember from when you were in the Seattle area. There used to be this big pit, right, like a couple blocks away from the convention center.
Yeah.
And that's where they had like a bunch of the buses and light rail and stuff all would like congregate in that pit. They
Mhm.
replaced the pit with the new convention center.
Mhm.
So that's where it is, and the parking garage is in the lower levels or side levels of the new convention center building itself.
Well, at the old Emerald City, the it was the easiest load-in of any show I've ever seen because you parked in the garage, walk your stuff straight to the big loading elevator, like 20 by 20 elevator,
Hmm.
and then you're
It's
just
it's
there on the
similar.
floor. It was really good.
It is pretty similar.
No other show was as easy as that. Um,
Yeah.
Not even Kansas City, where you can drive onto the floor. uh, yeah, I'm still pushing everybody to. Actually, now, now that my numbers keep going up every year, I'm going to stop pushing people to Kansas City.
Oh, but you
I
don't
don't
want
want
people
you
to
guys.
rain on your parade.
I don't want you guys there. I want people to keep saying, "Oh, your work looks totally different than
Right.
all the
Then
anime."
well, it's a big convention floor, and most of it is loaded up with the usual kind of fan art, like anime type stuff. So no matter what, it will still stand out. It just stands out more than it did the year or two that they had the Spectrum Pavilion, where you had like a who's who of
Yeah, yeah.
fantasy artists, imaginative realism, like high class stuff, plopped in the center of this convention that's like mostly the usual fan art fair.
And then people said it didn't go well, right?
It
The
didn't
one.
go well for most of them, but also a lot of the folks who plopped into that aren't necessarily people who have a lot of big commercial convention experience, and so they don't necessarily know how to make the best of that, even though like their art is high quality stuff.
Right.
The quality of the art in general, I know we've probably said this many times, it's a weak amplifier of what you can potentially do at a convention, right? It's really so much more about the other systems. It's about your pricing and about your presentation and about how you talk to people about the work and the kinds of stories you're able to tell
Yeah.
and the charisma that you can bring it. Like there's so many other
Yeah.
factors that like the quality of the art itself is a very small part of the overall pie.
Todd made zero new art in the time I revamped his. Well, I'm sure there were some, but not like big sellers. Uh, in the time that I revamped his convention setup, and I doubled his income.
Yeah,
So that's definitely true.
exactly.
Definitely true.
Exactly. So I think that a lot of those folks were more in that kind of Todd
Mhm.
sort of space mentally, or in terms of how they'd organized their space. Like they weren't. I did actually fairly decent for my numbers at the time. I recall I did better than most of the artists who are way better painters than I am at the show, that the year that they had the Spectrum Pavilion. Um,
Yeah.
and it was mostly just down to I was doing lots of Comic Cons and stuff, and I was in a more of a groove as far as being able to sell my work to people.
And I think people just don't understand like how much money is floating around a convention center. Uh,
Yeah.
you were even telling me, what was that yesterday, that fan art booths often do, and I knew this for the big booths, like the big high quality
Hmm.
booths, but you were telling me that like 6 foot artist tables with fan art often do better than us.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. The better ones, right? Because there's people who are doing fan art who aren't bringing anything new to the equation, like stylistically or in terms of the cohesiveness of the presentation. Those folks are probably not, like they're kind of just um, surviving, a lot of them, if that. But people who've really dialed in their fan art presentation, they've got some kind of a gimmick, or some kind of a twist on things. Like a good example are the ukiyo-e
Yeah.
booths that
Oh
are
yeah.
like at every single convention now. Like
Well, yeah.
that is a version of fan art that is very specific and unique, and like a really solid twist, and they're pulling in big money, right? And I know people. I know a guy who does like watercolor paintings that are essentially just copies of film stills and stuff. He's been pulling in big numbers at a lot of these conventions, including Planet Comic Con. He always does that one. He was definitely there. Um, so people who are, they're not bringing personal work, personal brand so much to the equation, but they,
Yeah. I'm still here, by the way.
yeah, you're
My video is stuck on a
yeah,
strange picture
you're
of me.
just kind of staring at me with this
I know.
grim look of disapproval as I go on and on about fan art. Anyway, point being, right? Like some people have really dialed that in, and they're making big bucks on fan art, and that's why there's this notion that everyone has to do fan art to survive, which is not true. Um, but some people certainly are making bank on it. Did you disappear completely? Oh. I don't know if
Hey,
I
Bruce,
like
I'm back.
this. All right, good. It's like you're
It's
abandoning me
still,
here.
yeah, it's still recording. We're still good. Well, no, it wasn't me. It was this system. I don't know what's wrong with it.
So,
You were talking about fan art. I'm sorry.
so
It just
anyway, fan art people can make big bucks. Some of them certainly are doing so. Actually, there's a guy across from me at Emerald City who's doing really well. His whole thing, he calls it hand over the hero. Have you heard of this?
haven't heard of it.
So like he does these, it's all fan art. It's all fan art subject matter, but it's essentially the hero character, the protagonist is a puppet, and the hand that's in them is also thematically related to so it might be like a puppet of Luke Skywalker, but it's like Darth Vader's hand that's
Same.
operating the puppet, right? So he's got a solid gimmick that allows him to play off of the relationship between two elements of a whole bunch of fandoms, and people stop and find their fandom and buy, right? And he does really, really good money. Um,
Some artists really hate fan artists. I don't. I actually really, I'm fine with them. Uh,
yeah,
Otherwise,
there's nothing, you know, in my book anyway. I'd say there's I don't have anything against it like as a broad brush, right? There's certainly some types of fan art that
right?
are very, very lazy and annoying to see. And there's some where it's like, man, I know you're pulling in big bucks on, like makes me want to hurt you a little, because
Yeah,
they're pulling in easy money on something.
yeah. I feel yeah. At a certain point, you're like, okay, this is out of control.
And then there's some, again, like the ukiyo-e things where it's like, okay, that's so clever. That is genuinely like a work
Even
of craftsmanship
yeah,
that went into that. Like they are elevating fan art.
yeah. Even
So
I
there's
want.
there's there's yeah, and precisely, right? I would totally buy something like that and put it up on my wall. That is a work of art. That is a work of craftsmanship. Um, so there's a full range, and I always like to think of it as like almost a three-dimensional kind of graph of like creativity, the legal issues, and so on, the ethicality of it, right? Like it kind of forms this space. And so yeah, there is some very lazy, plagiaristic forms of fan art that can give the whole thing a bad name, and there's also very high-end, classy forms of fan art that can give the whole thing a good name.
Well, I think, and I don't think it's just me. I think the cons themselves, and even I think in some cases the actual IPs, they realized these types of events wouldn't go on without the herds of fan artists, right?
Yeah,
We would
yeah.
we wouldn't have any booths there.
Yeah, the conventions themselves rely on it. Like the more they can drum up demand for convention space, that means they can expand their convention floor. They can sell booths and tables to far more people. So yeah, it's a winning combination for them. For the IPs, it helps keep these IPs in the public zeitgeist and keep them fresh and relevant for people so that they're more likely to keep going to the theater or watching it on Netflix or whatever,
Yeah,
buying official merch as well as fan stuff. So it's kind of a win-win there for them too most of the time. As long as a fan artist isn't getting too big for their britches and starting to sell merchandise that really steps on
yeah.
on if you were trying to sell like Star Wars plush or something,
And I
like you'd
think
probably
keeping
get
it. Well,
a
I've seen.
cease and desist. But
Yeah, I think keeping it in the convention hall would be
yeah,
the move there, right? Because you don't want to start. You can't literally can't run ads of your
well,
Darth Vader
going
plushie.
going back to the stuff that Tim von Ruyden or Ruden was doing with his expansion into additional lines of merchandise. There's types of merchandise that these companies are less likely to care about than others. I think is largely what it comes down to. They don't
That's true.
want they don't want stuff competing with their official licensees, or else it's not worth much for the licensee to go the legal route and pay a bunch of money to Disney or whatever so they can make bobblehead toys
Mhm.
of the IP.
I was listening to my. It comes up every time I talk about this Shark Tank, and Kevin O'Leary said that the way that they squash competitors is to not try and defeat them at all, but to basically, like, let's say somebody rips your, I don't know, your action figure off, and instead of 20, they're selling it for $10 on Amazon. He said that the actual way to compete with that is to create a different business name, same exact merchandise, sell it at a $9 price point. So you're sort of racing yourself to the bottom, but trying to compete with leeches is really the only way to do it.
It's an interesting strategy because, okay, let's say you own the official IP.
Mhm.
You can basically own the top end of that market, right? You
Mhm.
make the fanciest, nicest, classiest version of the product that is possible to make, and then you create a secret competitor for the bottom end of the market
Mhm.
to push them down to where it's no longer viable to compete.
What he was saying essentially is no, I think it is viable to compete, but like he was saying that for all his companies, back when they used to fight them, they spent so much money in
On
court and
litigation.
legal fees and
Yeah,
fighting it, uh, and it never, you knock 40,000 of them down, they just keep coming back.
sure.
And he
No,
said
but
that at least
I'm
now it's
agreeing.
profitable.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with that. Like, the method is profitable. You're no longer spending the money that you would spend on lawyers. You're spending that on pushing out some merchandise yourself, and you're also making it less profitable by undercutting your own undercutters. But you still own the top end of the market, right? The people who want the fancy, nicest official version of the product have to go to you. Meanwhile, no one else is going to be making a fancy, super nice product because they're mostly competing with the bottom end of the market. And you've just undercut it and kind of done the
Yeah,
race to the bottom, and you forced the race to the bottom. So they're not getting a nice profit margin on that end of the market. So
yeah.
they're less likely to bother with it after a while.
Yeah, it's an interesting approach. So you were talking about IPs like Disney going after stuff, and I wonder if I'm not doing a data study or anything, but I wonder if they're doing something similar to what I see. You've mentioned plushies. Like I've seen Star Wars plushies in large
Mm-hmm.
booths. Uh, I know it's happening. I'm sure they happen on online sales too.
It probably depends on how successful you are, also, right?
That's true.
Like, if they see you expanding your operation to every convention in the country and you're clearly making oodles of money, you're probably going to get a visit from some pricey lawyers. For Disney
Yeah,
specifically,
yeah.
not every IP is going to go to the trouble, but Disney might. Um,
I know a lot
if
of
you're
people
just,
were worried when Disney got full for that reason. There was a time.
right, right. I don't know.
Anybody?
I don't do fan art, so I don't have to worry about it, to
Yeah.
be
When you,
honest.
what did I say? When you said they were,
It's all academic for me. It's just like, oh, okay.
yeah.
I guess those guys have to worry about that shit.
I was walking by some of those. I'm not gonna call out names. I know the guys. They're nice, but with Stephen Nigerian, who was back at Planet Comic Con, by the way.
Oh yeah, I know he
Um,
always does that one.
no, he actually sat it out. I'll tell you that in a
Wait,
second. But
what?
no, so the he and I were walking by, and I told him how much one of the fan art booths made because I know the people in there,
Hmm.
and he was like, "Oh my god." He was like, you could see him start sweating. And he's like, maybe I did the wrong thing. So I don't know. I mean, I told you yesterday when you told me that 6 foot boots could make 10K. I was like, oh, I might change my mind on this fine art thing and go into anime boobs or something.
Well, I don't know. I don't think you'd specified 6 foot, so I don't even know what the
Hmm.
limits really are for a 6 foot artist alley table. I think anyone who's making 10K at a show would be silly not to be buying a full booth at that point rather
Yeah,
than an artist alley. Like, you don't need to quibble
yeah.
about the difference between like a $500 artist alley table and a thousand plus
When you're making, yeah,
when you're
the
making 10K or more.
I,
Like,
I met 2 separate people, and I don't know whether like they were lying to me. They didn't have a reason to. They could have been 2 separate people who were doing fan art booths. Told me they
mhm.
made 9K at 6 foot booths.
Okay, and like I said, I think my response to that was that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
That certainly seems possible, but also that seems like a missed opportunity on their part. If they're making that much money on a 6 foot booth, they should expand their operation and make even more than
That's
9K.
that's sort of why I didn't believe them until, you know, you said it didn't surprise you. I was like, oh, maybe he knows more than I do, but which is not uncommon for you. But the that wasn't a dig. Um, but I don't know. Yeah, I was very suspicious of those numbers. Um,
I'm not.
and,
I'm not. The only, like I just think it's like it might be some aspect of imposter syndrome, or like the meekness of many artists. They're onto a good thing that's working out for them, and they're like, oh, I don't know, that's a lot of money to spend on a booth. It's like, not when you're making as much money as you are, though. Also,
um,
the other thing to consider is it depends on their profit margin, because the top numbers that people give you could mean anything, right? Like, it depends on,
right.
okay, like, did you sell um 9,000 like $1 prints, like,
Right.
that cost you 50 cents from cat print or whatever, like, that's a different story than like managing to do so on like $40 prints that are, a big markup over the $4 it cost you.
That's something else. These two, when it would get slow, it's what you do. I go around and talk to artists. I try and make a point of it every day, and to go around and talk to people. And you would still be very impressed at the amount of artists that are selling very quality work for like 10, $20.
Oh yeah.
And they fight me so hard when I'm like, I think you could sell these for more. Look at me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't say it like that, like this is really good work.
People
Push it.
people build, it's cognitive dissonance or something. I don't know. Like, people get defensive, right, about their decision making on that kind of stuff, especially when the reason for the decision making is like emotional, to some degree. Like, it's a reflection of where they feel their place is in the greater scheme of things, and their
Yeah,
value to society is very low, and like, none of us have time to give them a therapy session
exactly.
to
Yeah,
really work through the issues that underlie their underpricing
their
of their own
self worth.
work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm never gonna forget the Dragon Con that Pete Morbarger came by and just took my $20 sign away, and he said, "These are $40 now." Um, and I was like, "Okay." And obviously people still bought them, which is,
Yeah.
I think you need something like that. You do need a push, or you need to be by someone, which is rare. That's doing
Right. Where you
really well.
see directly, oh, okay, this is how much it can go for. I think, or what I recommend for people is that they shadow someone who's, more successful, and see what they're selling and for how much and so on, and be like, oh, okay, like, they can do it, I can do it,
Yeah.
you know, or at least I can try. And I think what was instrumental for me was my first show was Emerald City, and I debuted my prints at 1 for 25, 2 for 40.
Yeah. So
And
you were keeping
then
price limit
the
before.
next year, I raised my prices to like 30, 35, something like that as the initial price. And then, like, the year after that, I raised it to the current price, which is like 1 for 40, 2 for 60, right? And every single time, my income went up by roughly the same amount that I increased
Yeah.
my prices by. So I'm like, oh, clearly I'm not losing sales, or at least I'm gaining the same amount of money.
And fewer sales, right? So the you're really good at that, at taking sort of maybe a more emotional backseat, and trying a more
Hmm.
methodical approach. And we had talked about this with commission structure. Raise it
Hmm.
up slightly every time you get a commission until somebody says no.
Yeah.
Why not do the same thing? I've tried to tell people, like, why not bring two signs? Try it out. If it doesn't work, you can switch it out. I mean,
It feels a little unfair to do it on the fly at a show.
because people
I
will walk
so
by and then have bought
Yeah,
things.
I mean, I'd rather not have someone walk back around and see that my pricing has changed. I mean,
Yeah,
on the plus side, I guess if you raise your prices
raise it.
over the course of the show, it's like, oh, okay, like you're rewarding the early birds. Like people can understand that at least.
Yeah,
But in general, I do like to plan my systematic changes so that they're happening not in the middle of a show.
I've got another artist complaint. It's
Hmm.
the box. I don't whether it's the cage or the banners or like just a lot of prints. Like, you know what I mean? You're making a little peephole for yourself out of the table, surrounded by
Oh, right, right,
a
yeah.
person of your own making.
You've created something that looks a little bit like one of those newspaper stands in like New York City,
Yeah,
where it's like it's the newspapers all around, and you just like framing your face in the
yeah.
middle of there.
It's. I feel like it's like you're sitting down the whole time in the first place. People can't see you from all sides. You can't talk to people. I think as
It's
readily.
not an attractive
It's,
look. I get that people are like, "Oh, I made all of this art and I need to bring all of it and people are going to appreciate all the choices I give them." Well,
yeah,
newsflash, people don't appreciate being handed choices. They don't want to
they
make
don't want it.
choices.
Yeah,
And if you've got like a nice little selection of work, you could roll up to a show with like 5 good images to your name and probably do pretty well. You know,
I've done it.
if they're the right images, and if they're images that build on each other, so that you kind of get that gotta collect them all
Yeah,
feel for those particular ones. Yeah, you could do with
yeah.
very little. I've told some of my mentees this because they're thinking about getting into doing conventions and they're, you know, trying to decide, okay, like how soon can I manage to do it? Like how many pieces do I need to make? And I'm like, well, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's less than you think.
Yes,
Like I think for me, I kind of rolled up with like maybe 12 images for my initial booth, and I've typically ended up with probably a little bit more than that overall between the prints and the playmats, since it's not a perfect overlap. Some images are better for playmats, some are better for prints, but you could do less than
you
that and
can
do
get
just
away
fine.
with 4 or 5,
Yeah,
especially if they're thematic. You
yeah.
know, like
They're all thematic, they're cohesive, and like I mean like Steve Nigerian's a great example.
yeah,
You've got left facing dragon, right facing dragon, and center dragon. Like that's all you need. People buy the set of 3 and they head off, and then you show up next year with, another set of 3 dragons, so they can collect those too.
the yeah. I always
It's a good
I
model.
you know yeah. If you're doing your first show, obviously go and try and shadow someone. I think most people appreciate the help. But then, like,
Yes.
if you can just go
It's a
to a
good
show,
quote. Yeah, it's a good quid pro quo.
but yeah, if you can just go to a show with a sketch, like a notebook, and scan the room and write down what you're seeing and feeling, it's pretty good too. Like,
Yeah.
hell, it works at farmers markets too. I've been to farmers markets where I'm like, man, this guy could really change things up. um, they definitely don't want to hear it, by the way.
No one does.
No,
No one does. It's just like giving a critique to someone's portfolio, right? And then
try and
for
build a
for
rapport first. Try and build a rapport.
sure, but people are always going to have a hard time. They invest a lot of themselves into it, and a lot of their own insecurities, and all the rest of it. Um, so that's why it's important to have places like this where we can just chat it out.
Yeah. I don't know. That's definitely good. Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is good, but I see more and more people making mistakes, and I wish that not mistakes. Mistakes is the wrong word. Maybe heading in the wrong direction. Uh,
not thinking it through.
I might make a little card.
I think there's a lot of like kind of reflexive decision making in the arts as opposed to like proactive or analytical decision making. So I think that's probably how I would frame that, rather than it's like, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to hopefully learn from them. But you definitely see a lot of people being like, oh, well, this is the established wisdom
Oh yeah,
that I have to follow.
like
Clearly everyone sells their prints for $10,
you've heard my rant on pricing
2
yourself.
for $5.
Brought my stuff for $25. I didn't make any money, but the guy beside me, he brought them for $10. That's it. I need to sell my stuff for $10, and then you make more money, and you're like, oh, I finally figured it out. And then you bring those little $5 postcard prints, then you bring the $1 stickers, and then you're like, oh shit, I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm already at zero.
I'm already at zero. I've raced to the bottom.
Raced to the bottom.
And, this year I finally managed to break even. It's like, well, or you could have charged double and made a profit.
Yeah. Have value. What I used to tell my...
Charged double and then rethought some of the other systems that are actually more effective.
What I used to tell my students when they talk about pricing is you want to price it what you think you're worth, because if you undervalue yourself and sell it and don't make the money you wanted to, you've told everybody what you're worth and you're unhappy.
The problem with that advice is that most artists I know seem to think they're worthless.
I don't think we think our art's worthless, or we wouldn't put it out there. I think
people are afraid. They're pricing based on their fears.
That's the number one,
rather than their hopes.
In all art schools is what do I price my stuff at? I get that question more than anything, and not even in schools. And it's like, even with commissions. And I try now to always give the answer that you gave, because I found it very insightful about raising it up every time. Just, it totally takes the emotion out of it. You're being strategic, and everybody likes business talk, I think.
Well, what do you mean raising it each time?
By a percentage. So, for instance, if you were paid $300, raise it up to, I think at one point you said you had doubled it each time or gone up 25%. I usually say 25 to 50%.
I'm trying to remember what that was in response to. Because I feel like, are you talking about freelance, or are you talking about
commission structure? And then you also...
Commissions?
We said it at first talking about commissions, and then you also sort of just said it when talking about raising your print prices at each show.
Right, but I wasn't like doubling it. I was seeing what the market could bear, and then I I did that 3 years in a row, and I saw,
Yeah, we don't have to rehash it, but that's what I'm saying. It takes what I said is it takes the emotion out of it.
Right. Coming up with a structure in mind, like, okay, like this is what I think seems reasonable, and then when I hit like 40, I'm like, you know what, this feels like the top that the market bears currently.
You can sort of
until like probably at this point with like inflation having hit, you could make an argument for raising it a little higher. I think Steve might be charging a little bit more for his prints, or at least giving less. I think he charges slightly more, but only if you start to look at the structure of the buy two get one free, or the additional sales. Like, I think he's it's a less of a drop off, maybe. And he was saying that he feels like that, that slight tweak to his pricing really puts him at the top of what anyone's charging at a Comic-Con for that type of work, and he doesn't feel like he can charge any more than that.
Well, you can see it on people's faces when they're talking about the work and when they're making decisions. I mean, it's not, could you at the next show go up to 60 and see what happens? Yeah, but I think you can sort of feel the room there, and we're sitting in a good spot. And also, we're not greedy people. We do want people
Right.
to actually have our work and
This is
enjoy it.
also true. It's a balance,
So
right?
this is an interesting one. I am in the habit of giving away free prints. If I have a print that I know I brought too much of, or someone's really
Hmm.
enjoyed, I shouldn't say have it. I mean, if somebody's bought, if I've sat there and had a 20-minute conversation, I'm really having a great time. They're having a
You,
great time.
you're rewarding other things, right?
Yeah,
You're looking at the overall interaction, and you're like,
yeah.
I'm feeling in a generous mood here.
I've got an interesting story out of it finally,
Sure. What
which
happened?
is somebody came up. We talked about the Bulgarian for a long time, and they bought a map. You know, it cost them $40. They get 3 maps.
Hmm.
I said, "You love this so much. Here, take the first cover. I want you to have it."
Hmm.
And then their daughter came back, and well, no, it wasn't their daughter. It was their wife. Came back and said, "I want to buy all of these, all the covers, all the maps, everything," which comes out to like $300, right?
Hmm.
And I said, "Okay, that's great. I'm glad he's getting a gift." And then both of them came back on the third day. This is for Planet Comic Con, that they had been looking at one of my larger canvases,
Hmm.
and they're like, "We want that too." So just that, I feel like that one kind act of giving this
Hmm.
guy a free print and making an impression made me close to $1,000. Um,
It can.
I didn't think of
People,
it that way, but yeah,
here's the thing. American corporations suck.
right.
Everyone knows it, right? It's just an absolute pit of despair. Um, but the main thing is like because of the absolute greed that our society has fallen into, people are so hungry for even a little whiff of generosity of spirit
Hmm.
is what I put it as. And I've seen it rewarded a number of times. I see a lot of like Kickstarters and stuff where, and it's not even necessarily like a very costly act. In most cases, it's not a costly act. It's the comportment, it's the additional care that they're taking. Sometimes it's just not dressing things up in overly
Yeah,
commercial terms,
I'm a
but
person.
there,
You're a person. Let's
right, there's a number of ways to do this. But if you can find ways to show a generosity of spirit, people will greatly reward that. They are so hungry for that because
yeah,
it is not present in our society
yeah.
um, anywhere near the degree that it should be at this point in time. I had a moment
Especially
like
at
that.
convention, especially at
Oh yeah.
conventions. No, like the amount of times I've seen people walk around and nobody even says hello to them, and
Hmm.
then they get to your booth or my booth, and it's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And they're
Yeah,
like, "Oh," you
welcome.
see their face light up. Anyway, what's yours?
Yeah, I had a moment like that too, where I had a guy who was interested. He wasn't necessarily wanting to spend a ton or anything, but like he ended up um, wanting to get the postcard pack that I
Hmm.
have, and it's just a random selection of my pieces. But he stated before he bought the pack, he was really hoping that it would have one of the three shocklands that I did for Magic, the Godless Shrine, Breeding Pool, or Stomping Ground. He was hoping for those. All right, so he buys the pack, $20, pack of very nice postcards. Um, Opens it up and goes through it, and it is none of those. And as soon as he started flipping through, I kind of knew because I could tell. Like I've had a few different orders of postcards over the years, for like whatever the batches of images that are most recent, right? So he starts opening it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that kind of looks like either the newer one or the older one. It's not the period of time where those particular images he wanted.
Right.
And I'm like, well, you know what? I was meaning to give one of these packs to my assistant because she had expressed an interest and she's helping. She should get a free pack. So let's open this one that I'm going to give to my assistant. And, as long as she's okay with it, if we see one of these images that you wanted
Hmm.
that you did not get in your pack, I'll trade you.
Right. Yeah.
right? We can just open another one here right on the spot. And lo and behold, it was thankfully
The right
one
one.
of the ones that had the images he was into. So we did a little trade, and then I think he ended up buying some like an artist proof. He recognized the generosity and he reciprocated, and that was not expected on my part either. I was just
Right.
like, I see an opportunity to be a human here with you,
To
and
do something.
like,
Yeah.
go just a step further and see if we can make what you're really hoping for happen.
Yeah, because you're the only person with the power to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
the
just like those opportunities come up more often than you'd think, and people do greatly appreciate it.
they do.
And like I said, I mean, the biggest effects this is actually even more prominent with Kickstarters, I would say, because the Kickstarters where I've seen people kind of show a generosity of spirit, I would include mine in this actually. That's a place where it can really snowball.
So
Because
what's an example of that?
so the example of what I did would be, I did the Slay Mat
Yeah.
Kickstarter. That was my Slay the Spire art, and that was the whole point of it was that they had come out with a third character that's not included in the title art for the game. So this was my opportunity to update the art and include the new character that I really liked. And so that was the reason for it, the product existing in the first place, or at least the cover reason. But people kept asking because they knew there was like a fourth character that was going to come out. And during the Kickstarter, they revealed the new character. And I said, well, look, I'm not going to even make this like a stretch goal or anything. Like, the new character should just be in there. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to make this an ask of the community. It should be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Up until they revealed the art, I was a little cagey because I'm like, well, I don't know when they're revealing the art, if it's going to be in time for me to update the art. But as soon as they included that character, it's like, yeah, let's have it in there. And boom, like my
wow.
Kickstarter, had a nice snowball effect and
It gives people a
jumped a whole
reason.
bunch.
That makes sense now, because I was wondering, how does this work when you're not in person? But
But
that gives people a reason to share.
other example here's another example though, like the also Slay the Spire related, when they did the board game and they blew past all of their goals like in the first day. And so they're like, look, guys, you have way exceeded our plans here. So we're not going to pretend that there are even stretch goals in this Kickstarter. Like, we're not going to like put arbitrary numbers, in front of you when you went way beyond and above. So we're just going to reveal new content that's automatically in this product, every few days.
Yeah.
And people responded to that. And then that, like, and technically, like, they were planning to reveal that information as stretch goals, and they're just like, look, it's just, we're going to be revealing additional stuff that's going in this product instead. And so when you kind of take, like, their plans technically didn't really change any, but you put it in like this non-commercial perspective of like, hey, we're just going to be real with you. And
totally
we're just going
non-transactional. It's just
non-transactional, and people loved it. And then they raised like, I don't know, it was like $3 or $4 million on that Kickstarter.
Right.
Like, people reward generosity of spirit. They're starving for it.
I think so. The amount of times that even just saying a kind word and seeing people's face light up, or I like to talk about art. I actually almost never mention my numbers unless I have to, or point them to the numbers, and I try and make a connection with them as a person. And you'd be amazed how often people light up or come back around because they remember you as a person, and then they start looking at the art. I actually heard that from somebody else this weekend. which was nice. But yeah, so that's one good thing. That's one good thing I do. I got to update my signage though. I don't look professional. My signage is all
Yeah,
done.
I feel that way too. Well, for one thing, I've been doing this long enough that a lot of my signage and drapery and stuff is kind of like getting a little
Yeah.
little rough looking, bent, and I've got my display copies of prints kind of, the glue has sort of
Yeah.
died and they're kind of bubbling up off of there's a lot of that kind of stuff that I really should
I think I'm
go
going
through.
to. For years, I looked for like a wood, somebody to make my stuff out of wood. But then I
Mm-hmm.
saw somebody's booth who had acrylic signage,
Mm-hmm.
like you would use for outdoor signs. This is
Sure.
very, very clean cut, looked really
Mm,
good. And
it's
so
a
I
good
need
thought.
to figure out a good price for those. I know that I have a vendor that does acrylic prints, so
Okay.
I don't know what they can do there, but
So you're gonna think about something along that. Yeah, and you can pay a little more than you would for like merch
mm,
because you're spending on something that you're expecting to last
yes,
through a few seasons of conventions. It's going
yes.
to amortize itself over that period of time, right?
Mm. Um, but I did finally find someone who was willing to make me signage out of wood. His name was Oakley. I don't have my phone or anything, but he does
Oh, that seems
woodcut.
appropriate.
I know Oakley. What is it? Oakley Designs or something, and he makes woodcut dice boxes, all
Hmm.
handmade, and well, handmade as you could be using a CT cutter. Um, and I actually really liked the craftsmanship.
Hmm.
I'm very familiar with dice boxes and everything, and this guy was the real deal. Made signage for people in his town, had a whole workshop. I shout out to Oakley. So yeah, he's probably going to end up making those signs if I don't find just a really cheap acrylic option.
My problem is it all has to be lightweight.
Mm,
So I need stuff that holds up, like doesn't get dented and messy looking very quickly. But it needs to be fairly lightweight because I'm already basically maximizing the amount of weight that I can bring to a convention.
wow.
So,
You've never tried to do the shipping route, huh?
not yet. At some point, I might be forced into it. But these days, you hear all sorts of stories about shipping taking longer,
So
getting
long.
more chaotic. Actually, we had a huge snafu with that at Emerald City because Emerald City is one of only two shows that Steve Nigerian, who we keep mentioning this time, one of the only two shows that he flies to. Since I'm his buddy,
Yeah.
he ships some stuff out to me. So he shipped I think, some coloring books, maybe play mats, and metal prints.
Yeah.
And one of the two boxes of playmats arrived on time before the convention. One of them arrived about a day late, and we were able to arrange for a member of my family to meet his assistant
Uh,
because they were going up to like a furniture store or whatever up in Seattle area. So they're like, okay, well that's 20 minutes away. We can get this one to Steve. The medals showed up like last or second to last day of the show at my house, which is like a couple hours south of Seattle, and one of them showed up like a day after. So like it was real bad, and he sent those with plenty of time to go. I'd also ordered some prints that were supposed to arrive the day before the show, and they arrived the day after the show began. Um,
so you had to
so
package them quickly, and oh, you don't package yours beforehand, do you?
no, I do package
You
them.
do. Okay.
So they sent. the box of prints up along with Steve's things when they went to pick those up.
Nice.
But it wasn't anything that was terribly crucial. I think I ended up selling one copy of a print that I wouldn't have otherwise had on hand. It was
Somebody
fine.
was telling me, I've probably mentioned this. For all I know, I heard it on the show. That FedEx upped their normal shipping cost. Yeah, after a certain point, they only do it by weight. Size
Yeah.
stops mattering. At 300 pounds is the maximum they'll do before it goes to freight. And I don't know what that costs. I looked into it one time, but I'm not going to quote it. And 300 pounds would be about what I need to get like a lot of canvases and even like one of those collapsible carts I have to anywhere I want to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So something to think about. And they
It's
hold
expensive.
things at FedEx offices. Is it? I don't think it was that expensive. It was like maybe close to $200, and then you just assume maybe you'll send them back, maybe you won't.
Well, it's $200, and then they're going to charge you something for holding it at the FedEx.
FedEx doesn't
then,
charge to hold there as long as you pick it up within, I think it's 7 days.
I don't remember that being the case. I've shipped stuff to the FedEx at Dragon Con and the one at Gen Con, and there always seems to be a charge. And it's not like I'm having stuff show up like a week ahead of time. Like it's within the week. But the other thing that I'm concerned about is that if shipping is getting less dependable and more chaotic, that means you need to potentially ship things earlier, which might mean that it arrives just in time or not on time, or
Way ahead of
arrives
you.
like way ahead, and you end up having to pay for it to sit there for quite a while. So there's a lot of uncertainty around shipping right now, which does factor in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the last orders I sent took like a month to get there, which is very strange for USPS. So I don't know. I don't know how much I don't even know how long this call's been going on. Where are
It's
we
probably
at?
been going on long enough.
It used to give me a timer of 43 minutes. I don't know how much I have left to say. Indiana was terrible, which is sad because I was hoping. I love Indiana.
You were hoping for good things.
Indianapolis. Yeah, I like Indianapolis, and I'm sad I don't get to go. Maybe I'll get off the Gen Con wait list. I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
Kansas City, still a great show.
Is this the second year that you've been on the wait list for them?
Yeah. Really strange. I don't. I was there for 7 years, and then this time I didn't.
Everyone heard it was a good show, and it suddenly got a lot more competitive.
Yeah, and I think that they're okay. I understand that it's supposed to be anonymous, but it is a small world, and I am very not on social media as much as I should be, and I think
that might factor in.
Do tend to add people. If I was a judge at Gen Con and I saw your work coming in, I'd just say yes to it. You know what I mean? I'm not really
right.
Yeah. And I don't think that's a reach to say.
Right. When you're choosing between people who are equivalently excellent in their field,
right?
The one that is familiar for whatever reason is more likely to get the nod, even if you don't personally know the person, but you've seen the art come around, so it's already got a place in your head. And you're like, oh yeah, I saw that, I liked it the first time, I still love it, you're in.
I know that we know that it's not truly anonymous because there's certain people that get in every single year regardless.
But also there's people who you're not the only one who had gotten in a whole bunch and suddenly didn't, and was very upset about that fact. Like, so, part of it's just the fact that it's too many good artists, like established artists, and not enough tables for all of them.
I'm not get rid of Arthur Alley and expand Artist Alley.
I feel like at some point they're in their process, they're almost like flipping a coin, because it's like,
I agree.
I know these artists, they're good artists, and they all technically deserve to be here, but we've got 30% less spots than the number of qualified artists. You know what they should really get rid of is that musical section that's right behind the artist alley.
Yeah, they should get rid
No
of
one
that.
ever goes back there.
Yeah.
It's just a very, very sad little corner of the convention hall.
Yeah, there's a lot of sad corners of a lot of conventions. I think that I appreciate judging for what it is, but I think that, so for instance, Dragon Con, it's judged, right?
Yeah,
but it's not judged the same way Gen Con's judged.
I don't think so. I think it's
not,
a little bit more clubby, maybe.
It's more like we just want to make sure that you're of the quality that we're looking for, more than
it's an outgrowth of the fact that Dragon Con used to be one of those small sci-fi writers type conventions like NorwestCon in Seattle. Like it was that kind of a con that supersized itself. Yeah. And so it still has the legacy of how that kind of small convention manages itself, even though it's huge now.
Yeah. Look, I know everything you're going to say when I say this, but and I know that one person or a group of people that their version of quality is different than other people's version of quality and all that. But I think rather than I don't know, a random different judge every year, maybe you're, I don't know, quality based. I mean, I say that as somebody that didn't get in. Obviously, I'd like to get in, but I was there for 7 years. 7 years.
Yeah.
And then you're just not.
Got to crack the whip, man.
I mean, I've been doing work. I sent them some magic work.
I know. I'm joking.
I'm not as upset as you think. I mean, it's a hit. It's a. I feel like
I'm waiting for bated breath for the year where I don't get in, because I think that I could just as easily get cut in a given year as anyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I just wish, we're all professionals at this point, and I wish it weren't as transparent, but not so transparent. I wish.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it's not a good way to say it. I didn't get into this show. I've been getting in 7 years because some guy different than last year didn't like my work. That doesn't seem like a very good system.
Like I said, I think it's at a certain point, it's almost like flipping a coin to decide who gets in and who doesn't, because they are there's more demand from qualified professionals than there are spots.
Yeah.
And so you have the unenviable task of being, and because it's a new judge, they don't know who was just barely edged out last year, right?
There should be a note. There should be a note. This guy was in here 7 years.
Right.
Because
I just think, how long you were in the show doesn't really count for anything for that type of show.
Yeah, but it sort of should, right? Because it is something that's in your show.
If you want, well, but then if you do it that way, if that's the mentality you take in, then you edge out any newcomers and you never get any fresh blood into the mix. And they do want to have some.
Not if you create a system that keeps fresh blood coming in. I mean, it doesn't have to be all or nothing, right? You could have,
but that is the
for instance,
system.
At their vendor, it's not, because for their vendor hall, they have their, what do they call it? Their makers market, and that's just for first-time vendors.
It's Entrepreneur's Alley, if I remember right.
Somebody was telling me, Paulie, I forget his name, but he goes to Gen Con, and he was telling me their system for vendors, and he said, your first year, you're in
they send you to the Entrepreneur's Alley, which is back in this corner somewhere. Yeah.
And the more years you're there, this is why it shouldn't be foreign to Gen Con. The more years you're there, you actually accrue their system of points.
Yes, that is how That is how the exhibitor
Yeah.
section works. I'm just saying it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have multiple ways to get into a show that have different systems. That way, people can align to whichever works. And you do have the option of getting into the exhibitor track if that's, if you feel like
Oh, I'm going
you
to. I'm going to do that. I'm going to try
yeah,
for that.
like
But you can't do it.
if you feel like you're a staple of the show and you can't
Right.
depend on the way that the art show is run, then get an exhibitor table.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. But you can't do that until you have to do that before the art show announces,
Sure,
right?
sure. The timing is
The
definitely
timing
awkward
is off.
in terms of
There's,
that.
I think, pretending it's
So it's more of
a
an overall strategic choice where you're like, you know what, this is one of my
right.
tentpole shows. I can't rely on getting into it, and I need to make a move.
Yeah.
So do.
No, I'm going to. I don't know why I didn't this year. I talked myself out of it because the booth prices are so much. But then I
Sure. They're very expensive, yeah.
talked to 2 or 3 artists that made the switch, and it's basically a guaranteed major jump in sales.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say guaranteed because you might not finagle your way past Entrepreneur Alley.
Right. You kind of have to have a solid enough engine for your booth
Yeah.
to survive like a week, year or two before you get sufficient seniority that they'll move you somewhere a little
Yeah.
bit better.
I don't, it's not so. Obviously, you like the money. Gen Con's a great show. You like that.
Yeah.
But Gen Con also felt the closest thing to a staple for seeing other major artists in the business,
Mm-hmm.
other than what Spectrum used to be, right? So
Sure.
that's for me. It's like, man, I missed out on the time
Gen
getting to
Con and
see
Dragon
everybody.
Con and
Yeah,
LuxCon are the main places to get the experience of the who's who of
yeah.
fantasy, kind of.
I had to make it up to a LuxCon one day just to hang out.
You should. I did last year. I'm not going to do that every year because that is, that is the vibe is that, okay, I'm going there to hang out.
Mm.
Um, and with as many shows as I do, I can't justify doing that all the time because I've got a family to spend time with too.
Yeah, I don't want Donato to get a restraining order on me either. No, because I
You
just
know,
sit in his
in
booth the
your
whole time.
particular case, I could see it happening.
It might
you,
happen.
you do like your Donato. You need.
I've learned the hard way not to meet your heroes, so I actually don't think I would talk to him that much. When I was a student, everything he said was golden and magic because was my hero, right?
Yeah,
And
but you're one of the people who, even when you were practically a student, you were like calling up Donato at his studio to chit
no,
chat with him.
I called him once a month, and I always had a question, and I don't know if he ever figured that out. I had a system, Bruce. I had a
Okay.
system because
When you told me that, I was like, the audacity. I could never. I could never.
really, I always called and I said, "Hey, this is Alan Mars from Cleveland, Mississippi." I don't know why I did it like I was calling into a talk show. I was listening to your. I think the first time I did, I was like, "Oh, I got your Joan of Arc, and your number was on your website." I just had some questions about your methods and
Hmm.
mediums that aren't clear, and he was like, when I called him, I didn't think he was going to answer. I think one of my friends dared me to.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was just him, and I talked to him for like 10, 20 minutes. And then when we were in New York that same year, I called him again before we went. And I said, "Hey, it's me again. Can I come by your studio? I'd love to visit."
Hmm.
This sounds weird now that I'm 33 years old. I
Yeah,
think
I
it's just,
remember. I've called Donato once, and I was in his smart school class at the time,
he's, yeah.
so I had an excuse to do it. And you were like, "Yeah, I call him like once in a while, like on the regular." I'm like, "Damn."
Well, I did want, I
Got
called him
some balls.
once a month is what my cap was. But you're in school. Like, I wanted to be, I was craved actual artistry. I went to one of these
Sure.
abstract modernist schools, and
Yeah. You were
I,
starving. You were starving for some real direction from
yeah,
a working realist illustrator.
yeah. And if anyone's never called, I'm not telling anyone out there to call Donato, but if you do ever call him, he says, "Hello, Donato." He's to this day, he'll go, "Hello, Donato." Almost like a 1920s
Well,
thing.
he's smart in the sense that these days most people do not enjoy making phone calls of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with Donato is like, if you send him an email, good luck getting a response. But
He told me last.
but you can call him at his studio and he will pick up and he will chat with you.
He actually, last time I sent him an email, he said, "Why don't you give me a call?" I don't.
Yeah.
This email
Yeah,
takes too
exactly.
long.
Exactly.
And he last time I called him, he said for the first time in his career, he got a phone put in upstairs because he refuses to answer email anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's imagine being so successful that every minute of your time painting is worth so much. And
Makes sense.
I think he likes talking on the phone too.
I think that is part of it. He's from a prior generation that maybe actually enjoyed phone calls.
I like phone calls, and more people should call me. I've put my phone number, my direct line on my business card
Oh
for
my
10
God, I'd never
years,
do that either.
and no one's ever called me. A girl
Yeah.
messaged me once after a convention.
Well, don't don't tell your wife that.
I told her when it happened.
Or I guess the other flip side is, be completely transparent. Like, hey.
Yeah, so 10 years I've never gotten a business call. It's just
Yeah, I do not encourage people to call me.
I don't even know if you do have a phone, but I don't even think about texting you. That's how distant I think you are with your phone. I
Well,
don't even think of you as a phone person.
yeah, half the time I've left it in another room. Anyway, I don't enjoy phones.
Well, I think as artists we're at our computers too, and so Discord's very quickly become sort of
Sure.
or
Yeah,
Facebook
just
Messenger.
exactly. Like those are the best ways to reach me. Or email. I'm happy to answer emails. Unlike Donato.
You should. Yeah, I actually
I
really
think
like him.
part of it is I enjoy typing out answers. I am very fast with the typing.
Me too.
When I was teaching in China, I could reliably amaze my students there with how fast I could type something out.
Oh,
So that is my most efficient method of communication.
I haven't done the test. When Sarah got her sales job recently, she had to do the words per minute,
Right.
test. Whatever the verified one is, they wanted her to do online, and I was like, man, I haven't done this since high school, but I love being I was the fastest one in high school. I tried it out. We should have a type off one day, you and I. see, see who's better. Do you think people tune into this show and are depressed when we're not talking about art all the time?
I don't know. And this is a hangout.
No, sure.
I will defend the ad hoc nature of what we do for as long as we're doing this.
Yeah.
I don't want to take it too overly serious because that's the path that leads to less transparency and genuineness, I guess.
Sometimes I
In my
feel like
mind.
we could be more structured and somehow get. I was really hoping that Q&A would go well because I felt like it was a way to structure it and give the most informative we've ever been was that one with Ron Sanders, where we were giving him tips on how to get into conventions
Right.
and what to do.
I
I've
saw
told
him
it
the
all.
other day actually.
Whoa.
He was getting a portfolio review at MagicCon.
Wow,
From
that
one of
guy.
the art directors there.
He is a highly impressive painter, and I don't know if he needs a full portfolio review. I'm glad he was there. Really glad he was there. He's really serious about making the switch.
He's going for it. He's going for it.
I mean, that guy's got skill. The problem, he is a great example of how you can have a lot of finesse and skill in one side, sort of all fine art and portraiture, and it doesn't necessarily translate fully to something like more action-packed fantasy illustration. And
right. Well,
I
and
think
then
they're still incredible, but
because there's skill and there's expectations of what you think they want to see, and I think for someone like him, and to be fair, a lot of other folks that I know, they look at the tabletop market and they think that Magic is wanting kind of the same old. But there's more of a cutting edge fine art streak in Magic these days than they're probably giving it credit for. And so when you show up and I don't know, I have to imagine there's almost a little bit of disappointment for an art director. You show up and it's like, here's my tiefling doing some magic tricks, and then they're like, well, and what else have you done? And you show them like some fine art stuff. They're like, we'd actually be more interested in that than the same old like expected genre tropes.
I think that's one of the mistakes I made, right? Is that my work is very classical in that I don't do certain things like extreme foreshortening or action poses. It's all very, very composed.
Yeah.
And it's something I didn't realize until recently. But of course, when I got the Magic work, they wanted somebody like, for instance, with a flaming, whatever it was, hammer. And so, like, I'm doing tons of force, making it look like what I think a Magic card looks like.
Yeah.
And did not work out.
It became a struggle.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Be yourself.
Yeah.
That's what they're wanting.
I get more Magic work. Oh, I gotta ask you. We gotta get off this thing. I gotta ask you about APs before
sure.
off camera. Okay.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in. If you've made it this far in our rambling, feel free to like and subscribe. I'd really like to know who else you want to see on the show. I'm sure Bruce would too. We should get Donato on.
Yes, we should quiz him about his phone habits.
It's been a few months. I should call him. All right. See you next time. Oh wait, and we're gonna be on the shorter artist hour.
Oh yes, we're going to hang out with Susan, who was on our show. That was a bit of a quid pro quo deal where she came on ours and we go on hers. And hey, another chance to hang out with a very cool person.
Yeah,
always appreciated.
I don't know if that's live or scheduled, but look out for it. We're recording it. What is it, next week? So
yeah.
All right.
Soon.
Thanks for hanging out.